My name is Kristen, and I want to welcome you to the very first episode of the Woolly Wonderland podcast, where I'm going to talk about everything woolly and wonderful. Very excited to get this started. I've been meaning to make a knitting podcast for a super long time because I'm a really avid podcast listener and watcher, and have always wanted a way to reach out to the knitting community in this amazing format. And so I'm super excited to get started today. It's gonna be an exciting new adventure. So a little bit about me. Again, my name's Kristen, and I live in New York City with my boyfriend Charlie and with my dog Dottie, who you may or may not be able to see. She's just chilling out over here. It's Dottie. She's a 2-year-old King Charles Cavalier Spaniel. And besides knitting, I wear a couple of different hats. So I'm a musical theater lyricist, which means that I write lyrics for musicals along with my composer who writes the music and my librettist who writes the dialogue. And I'm also a web developer. So for the past year or so, I've been learning how to code. And so I'm sort of going through a little bit of a career transition right now. But between all three of those things, I'm constantly making things and thinking about creativity and making websites and musicals and sweaters. So one of the reasons I really wanted to make this podcast was to talk about creativity and talk about all of these things that are on my mind all the time and, how they can relate to knitting. So I think that, I'm going to have the general format that you're probably familiar with the knitting podcasts, like let's talk about finished objects and works in progress. But I'm also going to have like a theme per podcast where I talk about creativity or just something unique and different that has to do with our knitting. So I'm really excited about that, and I think that will be awesome. A little bit more about my knitting background. So I've been knitting since I was 10 years old. So I've been technically knitting for 17 years, which is kind of crazy to me that I've been doing anything for 17 years, but there you go. So I started out, knitting not so great yarns, whatever you could get at Michael's, and then, which was really good to learn on, I think, but then I started getting into the nicer yarns when I was in high school, and then for about 6 months after I graduated college, I worked in a yarn store in New Jersey. And I think that's really where I fell in love with all things fibery and, learned a lot about different fibers and different sheep breeds. And I think that my passion sort of has carried through until today. So awesome. We're going to move on to the next segment now. Okay, we're back. And this segment is called News from Midland. And this is where I talk about some news that's going on in the knitting world that I'm super excited about. So the first thing that I'm very excited about is the new knitting magazine for men that's going to be coming out. And this is by Eric from the Sticks Plus Twine podcast, as well as Devin from the Handmade and Woolen podcast. They're coming together and they're collaborating on a new magazine that is focused on knitting for men and men knitters and also people who knit for men. And so I think this is great because, knitting is a really female-dominated world, and I think it's awesome to be able to bring men into the knitting world. And I think it's super important that we all support each other. So I'm really excited, and I'm hoping that maybe I can convince my boyfriend to start knitting. I'll just sort of slip the magazine near him and see what he thinks about it. So I'm really excited that you guys are doing this. If you're watching it, I can't wait, and I will be the first to sign up for a subscription when it comes out. The other thing I wanted to talk about in the knitting world is the Inside Number 23 podcast. Katie is hosting a sew-along for beginner sewers, which sewers? I don't know. But I'm super excited about it because one of the reasons I want to do this podcast is to get more into sewing and spinning and other types of craftiness. I have a bit of a background in sewing, but not really. I took sewing classes in college. I was a theater major, and so I worked in the costume shop and learned some sewing techniques, but I'm severely out of practice, and I would love to get back into it. I'm really inspired by a lot of the knitting podcasters who are amazing sewists. I want to say ists. Yeah. So the pattern that we're going to be sewing with Katie is the Hollyburn skirt, which is this beautiful skirt that is fairly simple, but you can you can sew the longer version or the shorter version of it. So I went to Mood Fabrics yesterday, which is the fabric store from Project Runway, if you haven't been to the city and don't know what I'm talking about. And so I bought some fabric for it. So I'm going to show you guys what I bought. So this is the fabric that I bought to make the Hollyburn skirt in. And I think that this is going to be really exciting. I'm going to do a little bit of a close-up. So I'm like playing around with technology and figuring out how this works. So I'm not sure whether or not, hopefully you can see this okay. But yeah, it's a pretty like geometric black and white design. And I think it's going to go super well with my wardrobe because I seem to have a lot of wardrobe pieces that are either teal, like the color shirt I'm wearing, navy, or like gray, black, and white. And so I think that this skirt is going to match a lot that's in my wardrobe. Okay, awesome. So now we're going to move on to finished objects. Yay! Yes? Daddy's upset about something. No barking. So I just finished. I don't know if you guys recently saw Mina from the Knitting Expat Podcast's recent episode, but her cat was like, pawing at her yarn and at her projects the whole episode. It was super cute, but I was like, Mina, I feel for you. I've got a little disruptive puppy. But anyway, here's my finished object. Hooray! So this is the 3-color cashmere shawl by Joji Locatelli. And it was a super wonderful, fun knit. So some of you guys know that Joji Locatelli made a pattern called the 3-color cashmere cowl, which was the cowl version of this. And then she expanded it into a shawl version of the pattern. And so this was knit in a few different types of yarn. So the blue and the white is Purl Soho line weight, and that is in steel blue is the blue and heirloom white is the white. And I was just going to make this a 2-color shawl with those 2 colors, but then I got this lovely color in the mail from Kristen from Voolenvine Yarns and the Yarngasm podcast. She hosted a yarn club that was inspired by Edward Gorey, the cartoonist and artist. And so I got this beautiful color in the mail. I'm going to try to go a little closer so you can see it. And this is called Figbash, and this is on her Nouveau base. And all of these yarns are single plied, if you're wondering. But yeah, I thought this yarn was so beautiful, and it was something, it's like colorway that I would never think of. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's like this gold and cream with flecks of blue and pink, and it's just like, it's something I would never think of. And I think it's so creative and beautiful, the way she put those yarns together. So when I saw these skeins together, I was like, that's interesting. I would never think that. So yeah, so I was really excited. One of the things I really like about this shawl is that it's super big. By the time I was finished knitting it, it was exhausting to do like the 500 stitches across towards the end of it. But it's really nice. I really like having a big shawl to be able to wrap myself around. And I feel like sort of like wearing a little t-shirt and like throwing your shawl over it is in vogue in the knitting world. And so I want to do more of that. So I'm super excited about this. I have a wedding to go to next month, and I think this will be a really lovely thing to wear over a dress. I think this is the kind of thing that like you can dress down and wear with a t-shirt. Excuse me. Or you can dress up and like wear for wedding guest attire. So super excited about it. It was really fun just changing between all the different patterns, going from like the big solid stripes down to the lace and this is the first time I ever did a picot bind off, which I thought was really fun. It takes forever because you're casting on more stitches every time. I think it's like every 5 stitches you cast on 3 more stitches. So that took a while to cast this off, but I think it's worth it. I love the little edging. Let me see if I can show you guys. Yeah, it has like the little wavy edging. Awesome. Okay, so this is the end of the finished object segment, and I'm going to move on to woolly whips. Okay, awesome. So now we're on to the woolly whips segment where I talk about works in progress. So I am a fairly monogamish knitter, and so usually I only have 1 or 2 things during these segments because I really like to focus on one work in progress and then finish it and move on. And it seems to be a kind of pattern for me that I do a bigger project and then a smaller project and then a bigger project and then a smaller project. I guess it's just like after I'm done with a big project, I want to do something quick and just something easy. And then I'm like, I'm ready for a sweater after that. So that seems to be the way it goes with me. So this is a hat that I'm working on. And it's called the Banff Hat by Tin Can Knits. And this is a stranded hat. I'm not sure if you can see it very well from here. I'm gonna come closer to you just so you guys can see up close what's going on here. Yeah, so now you can see it a little better. So this is a stranded knitting, and you can see that it makes this little tree pattern in the knitting. And so the yarn that I'm using for this is Green Mountain Spinnery. I got this yarn at Rhinebeck last year. So this is Green Mountain Spinnery, and the yarn is called Mewesic, and it's a DK wheat yarn. And so this color, the dark green color, is called Evergreen colorway, and this color is called Mean Mr. Mustard, which I love. It's so sweet. I have a tendency to buy a lot of green yarns, and so I bought these 2, not really knowing what I was going to do with them at Rhinebeck, but just because I love green and I needed them for my life. And so I think that this is sort of the perfect hat for it. I will tell you guys that I generally don't like color work. I don't think a lot of people like color work. Even though I've been knitting for quite a long time, I never really could seem to get the hang of the tension and everything. I'm a pretty loose knitter, and I always felt like I was knitting super loose, but then it would still turn out really puckered. And so I feel like I'm honestly just starting to get the hang of it. And I think this is going to be a good practice project because I'm knitting very, very, not complex, but just large colorwork Christmas stockings for my sister and my brother-in-law. So I think this will probably be good practice for that. And yeah, also I just like this hat. I love all things, like I said before, I love all things magical and woodland-y. And so anything that makes me feel more like a forest fairy is great in my book. And I think that this hat really will, with this little lovely, with its lovely little trees on it. So yeah, I've been enjoying. This is the first like stranded knitting project that I'm actually enjoying, and I'm actually able to do this in front of the TV, which has been nice. So yeah. Oh, you know what? I have a couple of things that have helped me get better at stranded knitting that hopefully people will find helpful. One thing is when you're knitting on the right hand needle, if you just kind of tug and pull the stitches so they're loose on the right hand needle, that's really helpful when you're like pulling over these yarns. And so that sort of helps with puckering to just sort of keep these separate. The other thing that I learned is when you're doing 2-color stranded knitting, you generally have one yarn that's sort of more towards the top. You're holding it more towards the top, and another yarn that you're holding more towards the bottom when you're knitting. And I recently found out that it's actually the bottom yarn that creates slightly bigger, more prominent stitches than the top yarn. And so I would definitely say take your the prominent yarn that you want in your knitting, which would be your contrast colors, so like the trees, the light green trees in this case, and hold that yarn towards the back, and then actually have your background color towards the front. I know it sort of seems like that's not what you would want to do, but it actually really helped me, and it made the stitches look a lot more even. I ripped this out before I continued with it. So yeah, so that's my woolly whip. And now we're going to move on to the next segment called Next on the Needles. And I'm basically going to talk about a thing that I am excited to knit next. And I think this is going to be my Rhinebeck project this year. Instead of knitting a sweater for Rhinebeck, I'm going to be knitting like a big woolly scarfy shawl kind of a thing. I really love knitting a Rhinebeck sweater, and I did last year. But last year, for those of you who are at Rhinebeck, it was so cold. It was freezing on Saturday, and it was snowing on Sunday. And so I thought, maybe this year, instead of knitting a sweater, I was wearing like a heavy, like worsted weight sweater, and I was still freezing. So this year, I'm gonna knit myself a nice, like woolly shawl, so I can wear a jacket. So that's my plan. And I'm going to be knitting it in yarn that I got from Rhinebeck last year. And this is Miss Babs Yowza in the Coffee Break colorway. And I just love this yarn so much. I'm going to come up closer so you guys can see it. So yeah, this yarn has like these browns, blues, and also this like very light brown here. And I love the color Coffee Break because it sort of makes me think of like sitting outside having a cup of coffee on a gloomy day, which I just think is lovely. This color sort of reminds me of like spilled coffee, and I just think it's beautiful. This is one of those skeins that I just have sitting on my shelf since October, and I've just been looking at it just because I like to look at it and like touch it and feel it. So I should, like, part of me is really sad to wind this into a ball just because I love it so much. But hey, you guys, you know what? Rhinebeck is only a few months away, and maybe I'll get another skein of Yowza there. When I was online for this yarn, Miss Babs always has a huge line, and I made so many friends on the Miss Babs line. There are these like lovely women who are sisters, and they were like telling me all about their knitting. It was great. I loved it. I love the environment of Rhinebeck, and I'm really looking forward to it. What am I knitting in this? I just completely forgot what I was talking about. So I'm going to be knitting the colorist shawl out of this yarn, and now it's blanking on me, the designer, so I will put it in text down below. And you know what? Why not? I'm going to throw a picture in too so you can see what I'm talking about. And basically it's like this big woolly triangular shawl that has this design detail where it basically has long strands of yarn, so it's really good for variegated yarn. And I think it will really bring out the colors of this. And so yeah, I'm really excited to cast this on, so hopefully by the next episode this will be a whip and my hat will be a finished object, and the world will be great. So we'll see how that goes. Okay guys, so now it's the topic of the day segment, and you know, this part of the show will be probably completely different every time that I do it, but something to do with either creativity, crafting, knitting, just something that's been on my mind. So recently I've been reading this book called Algorithms to Live By, and it's the computer science of human decisions. And I thought it would be fun to start with this because I've been really into web development and coding, computer science lately. And so this book is all about how findings in computer science can help humans make better decisions and, you know, maybe live their lives a little more effectively. Obviously, a computer is going to think differently or process information differently from a human, but I thought that some of the insights that computer science had were really interesting, and I thought it would be kind of fun to take a couple of the things that they talk about in this book and apply it to our knitting. And so the first concept that I wanted to talk about is called optimal stopping. And basically this concept is about decision making. So if you're trying to make a decision among a set of data, how long do you keep looking versus when do you stop and make a decision? So some examples are if you're looking for houses or if you're trying to hire somebody for a job. How long do you spend, perusing and gathering information versus stopping and pulling the trigger and making a decision? So computer science has found that the optimal percentage of time that you spend looking amongst your data set is 37%. And so let's say you were house hunting and you were planning to look for 100 houses, which would be kind of insane, but let's just say you were going to look at 100 houses. Computer science says instead look at 37 houses, gather information, find what you like and what you don't like about the houses, and then after that, whatever house you find that's better than that 37%, choose that. And you can also apply this to time. And so, if you were planning to do something for an hour, computer science says look instead for 22 minutes and then make a decision. And so I thought that we could apply this to pattern searching on Ravelry. Some of us do enjoy spending hours and hours and hours looking for the right pattern for our yarn, but some of us do have trouble making a decision. So I thought that maybe some of us could apply this 37% rule. So instead of looking for the optimal pattern on Ravelry for an hour, look instead for 22.2 minutes, and then whatever pattern comes along that's better than those 22% in whatever system you're using to decide what's better, then make that decision. So that's the first concept. The second concept is about sorting, and sorting is a huge thing in computer science because you're dealing with huge sets of data, and so sorting, the best way to sort items is a much discussed topic. And one of the most inefficient ways to sort things is to go through every single piece of data in a set and switch them around as you go. But one of the most effective ways to sort things is called merge sort. And basically you take pieces of the groups of data and then you sort that little group and merge it back. So I thought that we could use merge sort for our stash, for organizing our stash. And so according to computer science, one of the best ways to organize your yarn stash is to break it down into groups and then sort it within a group. So let's say you take your fingering weight yarns and you sort them by color. You take your DK weight yarns, you sort them by color, and then you put it all back together. And if you have a friend, then that is twice as effective. So that's how you can use a couple of theories and methods from computer science to help your knitting be a little more effective. Okay guys, so that is the end of the first episode. Thank you so much for checking it out. I'm really excited about this, and one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is that I don't really have knitting friends. I have some knitting people who I talk to on Instagram and Ravelry, but I don't really have a community of knitters in my life, which is the saddest. So I really hope that this can be a really cool way of reaching out to the knitting community in New York City and beyond, and I'm excited to put this out there. I'm going to end this with some vlog footage from this past weekend. So my boyfriend Charlie and I went to Smorgasburg, which is a little food festival in Brooklyn, New York, and Williamsburg. The name comes from smorgasbord plus Williamsburg. Yeah, you got it. And then we also went to Mood to get fabric, so I have a couple of shots of that as well. So yeah, I hope that you guys have a great next couple of weeks. I'm going to post the next episode 2 weeks from now. Happy knitting, everybody. Take care. Bye.